My name is Christopher Aaron Deans.
And Christopher, where are you from?
Originally from St. Louis, Missouri.
And currently?
Currently in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
And what brought you here?
So I came here originally in the early 90s to attend the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. Minnesota has some wonderful colleges and universities here.
Share with me a little bit about what it was like to come from a different state to Minnesota.
So in my journey, my family moved to Michigan when I was in high school, which gave me a little bit of time there, and then I transitioned to Minnesota. So my awareness of spaces was a little more heightened at that time because we had moved as a family. And so when I transitioned here for school, I noticed things that I probably wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't moved a few years prior to that.
And what were some of those things that you noticed moving here?
So I started to notice,
community-wise, culture-wise.
Yeah, those were the things. I started to notice families, communities, the separation of cultures, and how there were black neighborhoods that were like isolated, and then there were neighborhoods that were around the college campuses that were specific to different populations of people. That uniqueness started to become very congruent with other campuses that I saw and visited. That was a big thing for me. I noticed the commonalities as well from St. Louis to Michigan to Minnesota, both in the connection and the disconnection of people. And that's been really big for me, and noticing those pieces. And I think one of the things that really stood out the most to me was that there's always a need on the college campus to create a type of family or a type of welcomeness, belonging, and that shift has happened in a different way since I've been in school in the 90s. It's been starkly different. Here in Minnesota, though, I have found though that a lot of the colleges and universities that I've been to here have really focused on the academics and the culture and climate of their specific space. And that's been something that I've noticed a shift in as well.
So you talked about connectivity and making connections here. Where are some places that you and those folks that you found connectivity with, those folks that you found a new family with, and you were in college, so college life, like where are some places you hung out? Where are some places where back in the 90s you could find Christopher Aaron?
So it's always been really unconventional. There's the consistent since then, and then there's back then. I was hanging out in Uptown a lot. That's where the college students that I hung out with were, wanted to be. There were some theaters there. There was some shopping areas there. There was some places to eat there. Bars, restaurants. You know, there was a little something for us to do. I remember, I tell this little story. I remember there was a theater right on Hennepin. I want to say it was the Lagoon Theater, and about 8 of us. There was a combination of theater students and media students, as well as graphic design and fine artists. We were all hanging out together, and we just did these weirdest things. And there was a movie that came out at the Lagoon Theater, and they always do these either low budget or independent films. And there was a film that had taken place, and the people were coming out of the theater. And my friend Fayez and Tia came up with the camera, and they had a camera that they rented from the school, and they got the camera in the face of the people, and I got the microphone, and I'm interviewing the people, and I'm asking, what'd you think of the movie? And then as I'm listening to them, I'm grabbing nuggets of what they've said and taking that information and asking the next one, what'd you think about that part? You know, so we didn't know anything about the movie, but we just used it as a funny parody about people and perception. But it really made me start to think, as an artist and an advocate for Minnesota, I started to think a lot about how communities separate themselves from one another and isolate their mindsets about their understanding about one another. It's really inapt, and it creates a whirlwind of separation, and I think we focus on that as a community, not just here in Minnesota, but like as our country dissolves into that. We don't talk about the connections.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that those pieces and those places of connection, which is like South Minneapolis, Uptown, even in the last 20 years, how those landscapes have changed.
Yeah.
Past 20 years, the past 30 years. I even remember hanging out in Uptown, but that's not like what kids do anymore, right?
No.
And even, the landscape of South Minneapolis.
And I think the sophistication of what worked for me then, and that still works today, was the spaces like the Walker Art Center and the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. Those spaces I really enjoy hanging out with, not just because I'm an artist also, but because it addresses culture, it addresses people, it addresses a timeliness and the focus on what's going on with a certain people at a certain time. And that is like really paramount in a lot of what I think about and the trajectory of the work that I do as an artist.
Where do you live right now?
Right now I live in North Minneapolis with my wife and my children.
How long have you lived north side?
Well, let's see, we lived in North Minneapolis, I want to say it was around 2015, 2014, and moved around a little bit until we found and bought a house about 3 or 4 years ago. And it's been an interesting journey.
Tell me some feelings around your current neighborhood and community. What does it bring up for you?
Yeah, so there's the side of me that so culturally you want to be in a space where you're supporting your community, you're a part of the community, you're an advocate for the community, you're a vested community member, right? And then there's the side where my wife and I adopted 4 children, and my other daughter lives with us, and we have a family, a full family living with us. And the element of danger and unsafe mobility of young people really impacts my community a lot. The amount of robberies and carjackings and murders and the violence, the stabbings, the different things that are happening very, very consistently, and the low response from our police departments is very concerning, very alarming. I can't have my kids play outside in the front yard very often at all, because there's some possibility of gang members, drug dealing, somewhere across the street from us. And I'm constantly on high alert about the safety and the concerns that I have for my family. When my wife and my older daughter can come home from work or from an event, I have to be on the lookout outside to make sure they're safe. There's always these precautionary thoughts and ideas that I have to be aware of in that process. and that's difficult.
And you kind of mentioned this duality. Tell me some of the things within that keep you there and that you love about your community.
So in our community, there's a lot of shifting and moving that's happened in the last 5 years, I would say. We have obtained a grocery store that's focused on the North Minneapolis corridor by the nonprofit organizations that have really helped build a structure of space for food, like real food, not fried food or sugar. That's been helpful. We have a library that's been built about 8 to 10 years ago. That's in the space very close across the parking lot from that space. That's it's celebrated as a Northside Library. Then we have Houston White barbershop that's become more than a barbershop. It's become a community hub for. There's a coffee shop in there, and they're working on building some space for people to actually come out and do other things as well. And so those are a few things that's happening in that community. I'm also a public artist, so I've planted quite a few public art sculptures in the space as well in North Minneapolis, in particular, intentionally, to highlight and to bring folks to the space so that they can want to be there and want to ask questions and know that these things can exist in their space. So I think that there's some movement happening. It's not fast enough sometimes, but it is happening. We have the only aquatic pool that's all natural, preservative pool that exists in one of the community centers, also down the street in my neighborhood as well. So there's quite a few things that's happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.